Hi, everybody. This is Dawn Mitchell, and welcome to Dawn of Sports. Today, I'm welcoming in a really good friend of mine that I have known for years. And let me tell you, I hope you are all just kind of getting your imaginations going. We'll put pictures out, but this artwork from Mark Rivard and what he's doing for education and sports all wrapped into one is fascinating. Is that a good enough tease?
That's a good tease. I've been looking forward to this one. This is Dawn of Sports. She's Dawn Mitchell from Fox 9 and TalkNorth.com. I'm Jim Suhan from the Star Tribune and TalkNorth.com. We are coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services Studio. We also want to thank Lexus of Wayzata and Maplewood and Minnesota Masonic Charities. I'm not going to delay us any farther. Go right ahead, Dawn.
All right. Well, I'm welcoming in Mark Rivard, who is not only a former athlete, artist, educator, friend, and just all around cool guy. So
thank you.
I wish
She's never described us that way, Alex.
Oh,
you ever noticed that?
I got to up my game with you guys then. Sorry.
I'm just trying to make you feel really awkward. Go ahead.
Yeah. You know, it's hard to make an East Coast girl awkward.
That's
I'll just be like,
point.
you're absolutely
you're
right.
You're right. I
haven't
didn't
said
say
that.
it because it's not true.
Well, Mark, why I asked you to be on here, and I know this, but I'm glad like the people listening to us now. When I first met you, it had nothing to do with what you did for work or anything. Our friends knew each other. And then the more I got to know you, I'm like, you're a Sharpie artist. That's when I first met you. You were doing artwork on skateboards with Sharpies, and even Sharpie had signed you to a deal. And I'm holding in my hand right now, and I'll take a picture of it for everyone. A Sharpie with your autograph on it. And I remember going, that is so cool. That is so weird. What do you mean Sharpie art? And before we get to what you're working on now, you were laid up in a hospital bed, right? And was it a skiing accident? And then you just decided, I'm going to just not go crazy and do some artwork. Is that how you first got into it? Or did you always love art? And then that just kind of came as about of the accident?
That's basically correct. I started my career as an artist. When I was a kid, I loved art. It was a creative hobby. But growing up in the Stone Age, we didn't have art as a career. So just wasn't something I thought about. As I got into adult life, could you be an artist? That wasn't an option. It just wasn't something that was presented to me. And I found myself in 2003 recovering from a pretty significant knee injury. So I tore an ACL, MCL, PCL, meniscus, and I had about, a good long year of kind of recovery and reconstructive knee surgery and just kind of a lot of time to sit and do a lot of nothing. And so I skateboarded and had skateboards, kind of old skate decks laying around, and I was curious about art. But when I left high school, I never touched a pen again. I put the markers down, I put the paintbrush down, and I did art as a kid because I enjoyed it, but it was an easy A. It was just simply a way to get through high school, and never touched it again. Like it was a hobby that I just didn't think about. And then I found myself with a lot of time on my hands and off my feet, and picked up an old skateboard, and I started just illustrating with Sharpies on skateboards. And then that turned into selling some skateboards here and there, and then eventually starting a skateboard company based on my artwork. And I was doing it all with Sharpies. And then eventually Sharpie markers kind of caught wind of my story. Started to get kind of my first press and my first media attention for the artwork around 2005. And by 2011, I'd built a relationship with the brand, and Sharpie signed me to a national endorsement deal. So I became the face of Sharpie markers in 2011.
Who knew?
Yeah.
Right. Who knew that would be a thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of did. I approached the art world like an athlete. I looked at the world of skiing and skateboarding, and the way you make a living as an athlete is through sponsorships and endorsements. So I had this idea in my head when I knew athlete was out the window. That wasn't ever going to happen. I started to think about like, well, I'm creative and I'm doing this with skateboards, and I kind of am playing the line of both of these worlds. And I actually pitched Sharpie. I pitched Sharpie in 2007 about the idea of endorsing artists. And I started showing them examples of companies like Red Bull or, Burton Snowboards, Nike sponsoring LeBron. And I was like, these companies, Gatorade is a great example. They use these athletes to sell a product that has almost nothing to do with the act itself. And they didn't really respond as well to that at first, but I was persistent. I got an email address. Susan Wassel was the marketing director of Sharpie at the time, and I just never let up. I would tell Susan what I was up to all the time, and before long, we had a relationship, and I was talking to more and more people within the company of Sharpie, and they were inviting me to showcase some artwork here and there, little blog posts and this and that. And by 2011, they were kind of all in. And I'm not going to give myself total credit for this, but I think I had a strong arm in really utilizing the aspect of, like an athlete, of endorsement and pitching that into the art world.
Well, what I also love is you incorporate education and kids in it as well, and it doesn't matter. Right now you're working on a project, charcoal golf, which is amazing. But you started teaching the young kids way back before golf even entered the scene, which I'm excited to talk about. But what made you say, now I want to have kids get involved in art early, and I want to add educator to my list of credentials?
Yeah, well, it was, I did an art show in Belgium in 2006. It was really cool. I was invited out to do a residency with a shop in Belgium there, had an art opening. And that night, a teacher from one of the local high schools in Deinze, Belgium, was at the opening night, and she asked how long I was going to be around, and I was doing a month-long residency. So I would sit in the shop and paint every day and talk to people as they came in and looked at the exhibition. And I said, I would love to come visit your kids. And she said, could you ever come meet the high school kids? And so I went to a high school in Deinze, Belgium. That was my first experience going back into a school. And, talking with these kids, I had just such a blast. It was just a Q&A. It was very simple, really informal thing. And then when Sharpie happened, I, was obviously given quite a platform. I mean, that was a very big deal. It was, the Sharpie campaign launched in the New York Times, and it was the homepage. The documentary they made was the homepage of YouTube for a while. But it was before going viral was a thing. Social media wasn't really a thing at that point. I think I had a MySpace account. I mean, it was nothing. And so
you're not that old.
I found myself talking to, I started, getting a lot of exposure because of that. And then I was getting invited into schools. And even here locally, I was going into elementary schools and meeting kids. And then I gave a big speech at my former junior high at Jackson Middle School here in Minnesota. And it occurred to me, I have a great story to tell. These kids are resonating with that story. Part of skateboarding is pop culture. And so not only was the artwork intriguing to a younger audience, but it was done on this tool, this board that was ingrained in youth and pop culture. So I had a hook. I had a really engaging hook. And I kind of realized this could work. And there's something really nice isn't the right word, but I felt good about somehow kind of giving back in a way. I was inspiring a lot of these kids through my conversations, but I had a skateboard company and I had the support of Sharpie markers. So I started to kind of put together a curriculum very loosely. I learned what is a curriculum, and I started to create an art education platform based on my story. And I had the tools in place because I had the skateboard company and the support of Sharpies to do so. And that really is when things kind of took off for me. I started to brand Do-Rad things, and we've now, distributed. I have 750,000 Sharpies across the world to kids in schools.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been to thousands of schools, met hundreds of thousands of kids at this point. So it's it really kind of changed my life because, I like to tell, I kind of have this idea in my head that something about making art is this very, internal, almost selfish act. You're spending this time in your own head, in your own thoughts. And the opposite of that was going out and giving it back somewhere, and then really teaching these kids that it's not necessarily about what you drew or how well you drew it. It was the story you told. And then, the kids then learning, I can tell a story too. Well, if you can tell a story, that's pretty powerful. That becomes a very powerful thing. So it really, it took on a life of its own and kind of, it changed my life forever. I started to see a much larger value in being an artist. Suddenly this world became something I was really proud of.
And have you had kids then stay in touch with you?
Yeah, that's the coolest part. I've just this year I've hired a couple of former students.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've had kids that have, I get students that I've met along the road that reach out and tell me about where they're at now. I had a student of mine that just published his first book. Really, really cool stuff. So it's really that's definitely one of the most gratifying things is when a student reaches out. And I hate to admit this, but I've been doing it quite a long time now. So I have some students that are well into their adult lives, and it's so cool to see them succeed and see what they can do. Just based on, a lot of, I wouldn't give myself any of the credit, but a lot of them have said, meeting you was really important in my life. And so that's an honor. I mean, you just can't get past how big of an honor that is.
Well, just like art, music, sports, it touches people on levels where they may not have been open to beforehand,
Mhm.
you know, like, oh, I can't do art. I'm not a Michelangelo. It's like,
Sure.
no, you just have to express yourself. And we've seen, you know, history littered with people who couldn't find the words, but they could draw a picture about how they were feeling.
Absolutely.
And that can change their life. So you kind of have like a coaching tree now of people who have found themselves through art.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And it, you know, you get to, the art is an interesting thing, but it's the stories that happen around that. And then for me, one of the most valuable aspects was that a lot of my art is rooted in sports.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to kind of not just, you know, build a connection to the art kid, you know, in the school, the stereotypical art kid, but I also captured the attention of a lot of the athletes. And it was kind of like a 2-for-1, really. When you think about your audience, we suddenly, you know, as a brand, Do Rad Things, I was able to kind of find a much broader audience because it was hitting on a lot of levels. All of a sudden, some kid that might be more of an athlete was still curious, but I was still servicing that student that is super, super introverted and creative.
You know, a couple of years ago, and I was talking with Eric Kendricks, formerly of the Vikings, and Eric Wilson, who's now back with the Vikings. What they would do in terms of a release away from football was art.
Mhm.
And they would do a lot of art projects and do some really cool things. And I always thought, you know, here they're grown men, and they're not afraid to say, like, yeah, like what we go and we like paint, or we go and we make these art things, and people may not like them. Some are hanging up in our homes.
Yep.
And it's a nice release. And, you know, to kind of get like the pro athletes,
Yeah.
you know, who are the cool guys, to open it up, I think that really showed other people like, yeah, there's other sides to these people as well.
One of the best examples is the Air Force is my largest client. So I go
Wow.
on tour, I visit Air Force bases, and I bring skateboards and art Sharpies and art supplies, primarily to kids on base. It's called deployed affected. So these are students that are in that military system, the military brats, if you will, that get bounced around every 2 years to a new deployment.
I was an Air Force brat.
Were you?
Were you? Interesting, yeah. And
You could have benefited from Mark.
I could have used them. Yeah.
when I started doing this, a lot of what I do is you know, it is mental health work.
Yeah.
And I don't like to kind of, you know, I try not to make that, you know, too much of the marketing pitch or too much of the sales pitch. That's a benefit that's inherent. It's not something I'm going to, like, you know, really try to champion and be all about. It's just something that naturally happens. And the Air Force recognized this. And a couple of years after going on tour, I had visited, I've been to 138 Air Force bases around the world now.
Wow.
And 9 years on tour with them. And they came back and said, all of these adults on our bases want to do this program. The kids are loving it. Now the adults want to get involved here. And they said, could you do something for that? And I do a lot of work in suicide prevention in that space with a local organization called Shout Out Loud here. And I said, I definitely think I could, because so much of learning to draw and paint, really, from my own mental health, was a big part of that. And I created a program called Boards and Brews, and I sold it to the Air Force, and I went on tour, and I would meet and speak at Air Force bases to the adults. And so before I knew it, I was looking at rooms full of fighter pilots and soldiers and generals. I mean, I had generals attending my programs at certain points, and I would joke with them, I'm going to task you tonight with the same thing I asked your third graders to do earlier today. And for 2 hours, I'd sit down in a room full of soldiers, generals, lieutenants, majors, colonels, and draw skateboards.
Really?
And it was the coolest thing in the world to watch that unfold, and just watch like a room full of adults who I assumed would be curious about the story. You know, when I get up and I do a lot of public speaking, that part's interesting, but then to see the results of it actually happen right in front of you, and, you know, you never really understand quite how impactful that art or that story can be until all of a sudden you've got a 3-star general drawing a skateboard with a Sharpie.
So when you walk in that room, are you intimidated at first? Like that very first time, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to talk to these guys about like drawing on a skateboard.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like, how'd you get past that?
Yeah, I pinch myself every day. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I ever did, but you know, I got comfortable with it. I've spoke, you know, a lot of times at this point. So
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable talking and telling my story. And, you know, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's acting. It's very much my story and it's real life, but you kind of go into character mode,
Right,
in a
you
way.
do.
Yeah. You become, you know, after so many days on the road too, you get home and you're exhausted and it's just like, I don't want to talk. I got to
Right.
be done now. But
I get that.
Yep. But it is interesting that when I first started doing Air Force, especially, you're looking around and, these are fighter pilots and you're thinking, what in the world could I possibly bring to the table here?
Levity, art, creativity.
You created an outlet, and that's a powerful thing. It's very important. So everybody needs it. Everybody, no matter what you do.
We're sitting here in the conference room and we have some of Mark's art displayed in front of us. It's really interesting, beautiful stuff. It makes me want to buy a lot of it and hang it in my apartment. So we'll talk about that later, but let's take care of the business here really quickly. We are coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services Studio, and we'd like to thank Lexus, Wayzata, and Maplewood. And thanks to another Minnesota company that does great work, Minnesota Masonic Charities.
Today, I want to talk a little bit about the Minnesota Masonic Charities. When you think about the Masons, I get it. You think about the funny hats, those pancake breakfasts, which are phenomenal. But my dear friend John Schweitz and I have chatted about this, and it's so much more than that. They've got the Masonic home over in Bloomington. They've got the hospital for the children over at the U of M. They are the largest fraternal organization in terms of charitable needs in our country, and they deserve a ton of recognition. So thank you, Minnesota Masonic Charities, for all you do and for supporting us over here at Talk North, and a special thanks to my good friend, John Schweitz.
Back to you, Don.
Well, Jim, I want to ask you a question straight out. When you said that you were one of those brats, traveling around the world, it's going to be hard. Did you start writing as an outlet because of that? Or what do you think you had as an outlet to help you cope with that?
Well, I mean, it's going to sound really obvious now, but it wasn't obvious back then. I loved reading and I loved sports. Mm-hmm. I didn't put the two together until I went to high school and realized there was a school paper you could work at and all that. But back then, I just read everything I could get my hands on.
Right.
And it was something you could do alone, something you could do anywhere. You didn't even need the internet. You actually had you had actual magazines showing up at your house. You had books. You had, I just read everything I get my hands on, everything from, serious nonfiction to comic books.
Right.
And that was my thing. And I love sports, but again, I didn't really combine the two until much later in life.
Right. Sometimes you don't even realize what you can do with what you like. And Mark, you brought that up, and Jim just said that something to do alone, right? Like the loneliness factor. And I'm not saying everyone who's alone is lonely. There is a big difference. Mm-hmm. But to kind of strike that inside someone's heart, mm-hmm. That, okay, if you're alone or even lonely, you can do this. Like, here's an outlet.
Yeah.
How cool is that for you?
It's incredible. Yeah. You get, it's one of the most powerful visuals I ever had was I was standing in front of a room full of 175 high school kids. And the superintendent of that, I did a residency at a school in New York, and there was, in one room, we had 175 kids working on skateboards at one time. And at the moment the superintendent and the principal came in to kind of see it, they spend money on these programs and these residencies. They want to know where their dollars are going. And they came in to see what this program was all about. And the moment that superintendent and the principal walked in the door, not planned, not scripted, 175 kids were dead silent, working on skateboards with their phones down.
Wow.
And the superintendent looked at me. He's like, what have you done?
Yeah. And how can I replicate that?
Yeah. And they were blown away. They were, and the reason for that, I think, is you give them something authentically interesting, and if you present it in a way that makes this thing feel, it's authentic. They understand pop culture and youth culture. So like I said, I always kind of have had that hook. But there's a way to kind of create this energy about it that makes every one of those students want to be there. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing it in sports, for example, I think is a really good way. Most of our students, especially if they get into high school stuff, that's something they want to be engaged in. Mm-hmm. And I tell kids all the time, if you feel like you want that is a good route to kind of follow. If we can find ways to do things in our lives that ultimately, we all know what we're interested in, but we all have to do things we don't necessarily want to do, but, really hone in on the wants and like the things that pique your curiosity. If it engages you long enough, that's a pretty good win, especially at a young age with all of the distractions we have. And for me, it's kind of cool to tie it into golf in a weird way. I started playing golf just as a hobby. I mean, I never in a million years thought golf would be anything I'd do career-wise. And before I knew it, like this little hobby, I followed that path. And then I kind of thought, well, my talents are creative and I kind of have an eye for creating a business here. And before I knew it, like I was able to take this silly thing that was a dumb hobby of mine, going out and playing golf with my friends, and turn it into a business.
Right.
And now we're looking at really interesting ways of creating this dumb hobby of golf, turning it into an art business, turning it into a print business, and then finding ways now to give that back and creating. Actually, we're really trying hard to find ways to build this into a youth initiative, to find ways to give back through the artwork.
And now it's called Charcoal Golf. And I'm looking at some of I know that when you and I spoke previously, like you said, it's your hobby, your love. Mm-hmm. But when some of these golf courses, they want to commission you to like pick one of their favorite holes or do something for like their grand room to see their interest in your hobby, it's kind of, goes in a circle. Yep. Like you love golf, so you started doing these sketches. And then, I mean, it's not just charcoal. I'm looking at one that has the beautiful greens and all mm-hmm. that. It's just gorgeous artwork. And then they're like, oh, well, we want to buy that.
Yeah.
And so how did that come about?
It was, I initially posted just a very quick sketch. I did this silly little project during COVID called the Postal Express Project, where I posted on my social media, anybody that Venmos me $10 and one word, I will mail you a sketch. But I'm not going to spend more than like 1 minute on this sketch. It was a joke.
Yeah.
Well, it worked. It kind of took off and it got some media attention, and it was a feel-good story around COVID. And, the night that aired on the news, I had like 800 requests overnight. So I realized, well, this project is a brand in and of itself. So I created the Postal Express Project. And I had to cut it off. It was absurd for $10. It was just economically made 0 sense, and it was just killing my time.
Right.
And so I cut it off, and I said, I'm going to open it up once a year. So every December, which is kind of a slower month for me, the schools don't want to book much before, holiday break and all that. Every December for about 3 weeks, I say the Postal Express Project is open. But I bumped it up to $100, and it still is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I did a really quick sketch. I was like, I won't spend more than 10, 15 minutes on these, but they're good sketches, and it's a piece of original artwork that you can get at an affordable price. And I got a request for a golf hole, number 17 at Edinburgh, USA here in Brooklyn Park. I painted that very quickly, and I was kind of like, that was cool. I like that because I grew up at Edinburgh. Yeah. This is my home course. And so I started painting more. And then once I posted one of those, I got flooded with golf requests, 1 million requests for golf holes. Everybody has their favorite hole or their hole-in-one story. And I was doing these commissions, but it was, again, just not economical because I enjoyed it. I found myself spending 2-3 hours on a painting. And for the price, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And, right. I was overwhelmed, just way too many requests. And then clubs started to kind of reach out. My friends and I, Pat Jacobson and Russ Olson, I got to give those guys a lot of credit. They are our two partners on Charcoal Golf. And Pat has a lot of relationships with these clubs and brands in the golf world. Russ Olson runs a major print shop and has access to scanners and printers. And so we kind of thought about it. The three of us got together and we were like, we have kind of the dream team here. We have the artwork, we have the partnership side, and we have a business that we can print on demand. We have no overhead, no inventory. And so
wow,
at pennies to the dollar, we started a business and a website. And the next thing I knew, I was getting requests from some of the biggest and best golf courses on the planet to come paint their courses. And so it took off. It went absolutely crazy. We call it Charcoal Golf. It's a business. It's its own business at this point. And it's been pretty remarkable to see the rise from that. I just came back from Prairie Dunes Country Club, which is consistently ranked in the top 20 in the world. And I give them a lot of credit as well. Prairie Dunes first saw one of my paintings and they reached out over social media and said, "Who are you? What is this? And are you selling that? Because we didn't give you permission." And, there's some legality to that. Yeah. And I said, "No, you definitely, you didn't, but I think maybe we could, right?" And I was like, "Are you interested in this? Maybe let me paint you a hole and let's see if we can build a partnership." And this is where the partnership idea started. And Prairie Dunes, totally to their credit, just said, "This is a random dude that doesn't have a business, but we want him to paint something for us." So I painted it. We put out a print release of the hole that I did there. It was 12 and 13, this turn there. And they loved it. And they came back to me and kind of blew my mind. They said, "We want to buy 9 paintings up front that we're going to hang in the front entrance of Prairie Dunes Country Club." Yeah. So sight unseen, they commissioned me to paint 9 of the original holes at Prairie Dunes Country Club. It's called the Maxwell Collection. It was Perry Maxwell's original 9 holes from 1937. So they put in this commission, and that really put the wheels in motion. Next thing we know, we're now up an official partner of a top 20 golf course in the world. And we have a platform. We've created a structure for how we do this. And Forbes wrote an article about us. And
Wow.
when the Forbes article dropped, the phone was ringing off the hook. We were getting calls from, some of the best courses on the planet. We just signed an agreement with the TRE Links in New Zealand. We're working with some of the best now. And it's been, kind of a skyrocket rise to success.
And you're still loving it. And that's what you love to do.
And it's the best. Well, I got to go play all these courses. It's research and development.
Right. I mean, you just have to. You got to know what you're talking about and drawing, right?
Not a bad gig to sit at Prairie Dunes for the weekend and play golf and,
That's fantastic.
And now you're going to make it like so that kids can get interested in golf as well, right? Because you always find a way to tie that education and the kids in, right?
Yeah. What I started to think about as I was talking to some of these clubs, and let's not sugarcoat it. We're talking to a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking to a lot of privilege, and the thing I've always been most proud of in my career was being able to turn a silly illustration on a skateboard into something that was impactful to hundreds of thousands of kids, and creating an educational model that is in play today at schools all over the world. I call it experiential learning, and that model is happening in schools everywhere. And being able to kind of find a way for very low budget public schools to create programs and projects that their kids are genuinely interested in. That to me is the most proud thing. That's what I'm the most honored to say I've been able to do as an artist. And so when Charcoal happened, I knew who I'm talking to. It's not, I'm not naive to the idea that there's a lot of money in these places. They have the pockets to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And it occurred to me like, okay, we got to find a way these clubs don't need anything from me. They want to get the artwork. They're willing to pay for the artwork. They're happy to do the prints. And our model up front is we'll give each club a commission of the print. So as these print sales go, the way the partnership works is we lean on their marketing and their following to sell prints. We give them a commission of the print sales. They don't need that commission.
Mm-hmm.
These people don't need my 15% commission rate. That a couple $100 a month or whatever doesn't move the needle here.
Right.
But what could move the needle is if we find a way for their members to get involved and their club to be involved in a way that we give back to that community, that grows the game of golf and creates an avenue maybe into golf, but also into art. It's not necessarily, you certainly don't expect everyone that buys one of these to be a golfer per se.
Right.
So my nephews are all beneficiaries of Youth on Course. They're all members of Youth on Course. And frankly, we couldn't afford, I have 3 nephews. There's no way I could take those kids golfing 4 or 5 days a week and, be able to afford something like that. So Youth on Course has been huge for them. They fell in love with the game. I get to go play golf with my nephews all the time because of this organization. So my mind instinctively went to how do I find a way to take this golf model and do something a little more productive with it. So the first step is let's make donations on every sale towards something like Youth on Course or First Tee, any of these organizations. We'll go talk with a club, wherever that club may be, and we'll say, what's the organization your members like to support the most? We want it to be youth-oriented and education-oriented, and if it meets that criteria, then let's make the sales go towards that. Let's do something good with this project. Well, that just adds better marketing. It's good PR for these clubs. A lot of them need that PR. So it's a pretty cool and interesting way to kind of give that, take this world that frankly I don't belong in or don't feel like I belong in, but find a way to kind of give that to something that I'm more proud of, that as, makes me really tick, that really kind of drives my motivation towards it. If I can help a bunch of kids learn to play golf or get interested in art or see an avenue, I'll paint golf courses all day.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, I could talk to you all day all about this. I do have one, and I've known you for a long time, but I do have one question. Out of all of the artwork that you have done, do you have one favorite that, if there's a fire in your house, you are tucking that under your jacket and it's going with you, just even if you've sold it to someone, but like in your mind, what is that number one thing?
Yeah, I do. It's the first skateboard I ever made is I bought the skateboard in 1993, and it's a story I tell all the time when I'm speaking. I bought this skateboard in 1993. I learned to skate on this board. It was my first real skateboard, a real proper street skateboard. And it's serendipitously, it was the first board that I grabbed the night I was a couple of weeks removed from a knee surgery, sitting in the basement, really in the dumps. I mean, we're, in a bad place at that point. And I picked that skateboard up and I started illustrating on it. And I drew the Minneapolis skyline. And as a kid, that was my skate park, was downtown Minneapolis. And I loved that view. I loved the view of the Minneapolis skyline. I used to go and sit up on my mom's roof just to look at the buildings. And so I drew the Minneapolis skyline on that skateboard. I drew it with a little black Sharpie. And again, serendipity. I mean, the first skateboard I ever drew was a Minneapolis skyline with a small black Sharpie, an ultra-fine black Sharpie. That changed my life. So that piece of artwork, I've never sold it, thankfully. I had no idea where that would lead me in my life. But, that one board is the only material possession I'd probably be running into the burning house to grab.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yep.
That's so awesome. Well, I know that for me, this is, I have a I don't know, replica,
yes,
a print on a skateboard of the skyline with the cherry and the spoon. And it's by far when I had it in my living room and then even my guest bedroom where it's in there, everyone's like, what is that? That's so cool. Who did that? Did you skateboard? I'm like, believe it or not, you may not think this of me. I was a skateboard kid, but mine was polyurethane. I had the big plastic. It was kind of purple pinkish, but I love skateboarding. So when you and I first met and I did this, I still have this, but this is my favorite.
Yeah.
So, and I have a print of it too and everything, but I can see where if that was the first thing that really turned the corner for you into this world.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, I got to ask real quick.
Yeah.
The Timberwolves, we're looking at a print of the Timberwolves jersey hanging up. What's the inspiration for that, or how'd that come about?
That was done 2 years ago before the playoffs. I drew the Anthony Edwards jersey, almost as if it's hanging in the locker room. It's got a little clothes hanger on it, so it seems kind of ominous and slightly casual, but it's Anthony Edwards jersey, and it was drawn on a skateboard. That's drawn with Sharpie on a skateboard. And I just kind of did it as a one-off. I mean, somebody had mentioned something to me about that'd be really cool. And when I did that, we went to a playoffs game, and I actually met the producers from Netflix for the Starting Five show. And they were interested in the artwork, and they actually wanted to give that board to Anthony Edwards. And so I was very excited about that. So I drew that up, and I presented the board to them. And long story short, they essentially hadn't gotten back to me, and they were dead set on gifting this board to Anthony Edwards. And all I said in return is I want to be able to hand it to him myself and get a photo. That's really good for me for the following and all that, So, and they're busy, the playoffs went on, the Wolves went a little bit further, and we didn't end up making that connection. But, I made prints of it and have since had a collector that bought the original board from me. So,
okay.
But it was
Sorry,
just,
Aunt.
Yeah. Hey, we can do another one, no shortage of that. But it's been fun because it's opened up all these conversations. Like, I'd love to do some of this more sports related artwork. Some of the most popular pieces I've done are, Minnesota Vikings themed paintings or Timberwolves themed paintings. And, one of the things I wanted to mention, Don, is the thought process a lot of times when I present to a school is we don't have that many skateboarders in our school, or our boys are not that interested in art. And I always tell people it's pop culture. It's got very little to do with whether or not you skateboard or whether or not you're an artist. I started tracking metrics. 60% of the students that register to come to my programs are female. Mm-hmm. And that to me is really, really impressive. Like, that shows you that sports and the pop culture aspect, there is something to that draws people in. I don't know anyone at my age that plays football, but we all watch it every single weekend religiously. So there's something really cool about that. And I love that the art angle has actually kind of talked to a lot of girls in schools. And that's been the hook into a bigger conversation that really is about self-confidence. It's about presenting your story professionally and really believing you can do something, whether that's start a business, make a piece of artwork, get into that sport. There's a lot of angles you can take there. So yeah, I'd love to do more of the sports art. The Lynx jerseys, I think, would be really, really cool to try. There's a lot of things there.
Well, if there's if the Lynx are listening or the Vikings are listening right now, how can someone get a hold of you to either get into one of, your art projects in terms of getting their kids exposed to you, or how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I kind of have two routes. I do, my skateboard art world and education world is called Do Rad Things. So Google Do Rad Things, you'll find me. That's on Instagram as well, or doradthings.co, C-O. And then on the golf side of things, charcoalgolf.com. And that's also on Instagram, just charcoal golf.
I was thinking of you. I was just in Scotland, and my friends and I took a train ride up to St. Andrews.
Nice.
And it was right after the Ryder Cup. So I see there was a bunch of, I would say, teenage guys that were students at St. Andrews, and they're all swarming around. I couldn't see who this guy was. And they're like, over here. And there was a guy on the course, right about to tee off. And he's coming up, and they're getting a picture, and they're trying to get their buddy to do it. The buddy doesn't want to take the picture, wants to be in it. So I, of course, being the American, would you guys like me to take your photo? And they're like, oh, yes, ma'am. Yes. And so I take this picture, and it was Matt Fitzgerald, who was just in with the Ryder Cup.
Yeah.
And so it was so funny. I'm like, okay, Matt, stand right there. Like I knew him, right? I'm like, Matt, stay right there. Cause they go, this is Matt. I didn't know his face. Yeah. And then I saw his bag, and taking these pictures, and it made me feel like golf is alive and well for young people, because here they are, college students, maybe freshman or sophomore. They were young, and they were loving it, and they were so excited that they got the picture. And he couldn't have been more fantastic with them. So I'm like, wow. And so I kept thinking, you need to go there and draw something there. So
well, I just finished a painting for a little course in Scotland. I can't talk about it yet.
Okay. All right.
Well, you have to come back and tell us about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Mark Rivard, thank you so much. We're going to take some pictures. So if you guys are wondering, I want to see that picture of the Wolves jersey or everything, we will post this when we post the podcast. And we'll definitely have you on again when you can speak about the secret Scottish course.
Yeah, there's some good ones coming.
All right, thanks, Mark.
Thank you
really
so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.